Okay, today I have Emily Spence on my channel. She's been kind enough to do an interview with me, and we've had quite a laugh trying to get the technology to work in our favor and get set up. But we got it, 20 minutes late. So I'm going to let Emily just kind of introduce herself, and then I asked her to just kind of briefly touch on her history with an eating disorder, what she really struggled with, and kind of what got you into recovery. What was that thing or time in your life that you were like, this actually needs to happen? So go ahead, Emily.
So if I rewind back to that, it was in my sixth form years where I can think that's where it started. In terms of I think there was just a lot of stress that was going on at the time. I think as well for me, it was a lot of approaching that point where I was finishing education, life was going to be changing, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. There was almost this big pressure at school to be like, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And I didn't know. And there was always this sort of just tension. And I think as probably a lot of people can relate to, it's that thing of, I'm not sure when it started. I think as a person, naturally, I tend to, when I get stressed, my appetite just sort of drops off. That's just how I am naturally as a person. And so I can't pinpoint at what point it became an eating disorder, but at some stage, the stress, the pressure, it just was a very negative downward spiral for me. And that was probably, in terms of just constantly going down, it was only probably about a year. And towards the latter stages of that, I'd finished my sixth form, and I was getting towards a stage of everyone around me was going off and doing all these things. They were going away, they were going on holidays, they were doing just fun things, they were talking about their life, and I was very much living this rigid life where every day looked the same, and I was kind of engaging a little bit with services, but nothing felt right. And if anything, my experience of the services I went to, they were more supportive of my eating disorder than my recovery. Like, I didn't feel like the support approach that was taken was particularly helpful. I found a lot of people were just quite triggering, and I don't think it's necessarily their fault. I don't blame anyone. I think that was just the approach that was taken. That's the sort of standard approach. I jumped into recovery with both feet hard when, I can't really remember the day. I think it was just a random day. I woke up and I just was like, I'm so done with this. I'm so done with the days just being the same, and all my friends are going off and they're living their lives, and I was just really done. I was just done, basically. And I remember going downstairs, and at this time I was still living with my parents, and I said, I just really want some biscuits. And I think it was that thing, my mum was a bit like, okay, and we went and we got, and I just started eating, and I absolutely jumped in. And that was the start of my recovery. And I think for the first sort of, it's really hard to like look back and have exact time frames, when these things.
Right. Totally.
I think probably for the first sort of year of my recovery, had very high extreme hunger. I jumped into recovery. I was honoring it. I was very much doing it on my own. I'd kind of taken a step back from those services that I was a bit involved in because I just didn't find them particularly helpful. I had read bits from Tabitha. I'd also read bits from Gwyneth Olin and, Minnie Maud and all that kind of stuff. And I'd just seen them bits and pieces. And I thought, oh, this aligns more, it just made sense to me. It made sense of why I was feeling so crazy hungry, why this concept of, oh, but you shouldn't be, and you should just do this and just this meal plan, and it just didn't seem right. So I did that. Then for me, about a year in, I had, unfortunately, a very negative appointment with it was very much just a discharge appointment, to be honest, but it was an appointment with the lead psychologist, and in the services they were just going to discharge me. And she basically just sat there and said to me, I think you could do with a bit of control here. And I'd made such brilliant steps forward, like such brilliant. I still had work to do, there's no doubt about it, but I'd made such amazing steps forward. And I remember that day, I went in, I'd gone in, I'd gone past McDonald's, we'd grabbed a McDonald's, I'd come out of McDonald's, I'd gone for a muffin. I remember it so clearly. And then I remember going into that appointment, and I sat there and I was so alive. You know, I was so alive and so happy and so free. And I said, I feel more like myself. I'm eating what I want, when I want, as much as I want. It's brilliant. I can see myself going and doing things. I've got more interest, all of these things. You know, when I was in the depths of that extreme hunger, I was like, oh, this is never going to happen. I'm only going to just eat and eat forever. I was starting already to see myself coming out of that. And I was sharing all this with her, and she was just like, oh gosh, you know, I think you need a bit of control. And I remember coming out of that appointment, and it really hit me. I really struggled. I really struggled with that. And from that appointment, I then very much sort of went downwards. I had a bit of a slip up from that appointment. And then over the next couple of years, I kind of got back on board and got back in tune with myself, was honoring things. And I can now look back and think at the end of that period, I think I'd got myself to a good place, but I'd say the best way I'd describe it is I'd attacked all of the stuff that was very obvious, but I'd not gone seeking the little tendrils of disorder that stick around, you know, like I'd done stuff that pops up that was obvious, but I'd really, really gone in attack mode on all the little bits where my eating disorder was still just clinging on. And I think then started university, and my life just opened up as it does. And I think alongside that, with just taking my foot off the accelerator a little bit, I think over my university studies, moving out, being on my own, all these things, I just slipped into what I call my quasi. And I know I shared that quite a lot when my journey out of quasi, I shared that a lot on my Instagram. And it was when I finished my degree and I realized very much, I was like, I am done with this. I'm done with half life, this half shadow existence, this kind of conveyor belt style day to day. And I decided, that's it, I'm done. I'm committing to full recovery. I'm not spending another day in this kind of like, well, you are much better than you were, you know, you do this now. And so I committed, and from that was July 2019. And then the following year, I was completely recovered. Yeah, I think about spring, summer 2020, I would say I was completely recovered. And I say would say because I think sometimes when we're in recovery, I'm not sure about your experience, but you almost imagine this, like, I'm recovered as this day where you just wake up like, I'm recovered. How amazing. This actually, for me, it was almost like a reflective thing where I'm just living my life, and suddenly I was more aware of the fact that I just didn't have an eating disorder anymore. It wasn't there. I didn't have the thoughts. I was free of it. And so, yeah, I think that's
so cool.
That's a summary of my experience. I say sometimes I think, gosh, I wish it had just been more like, oh, I got on board recovery and I did it. But I also think there's something quite powerful about sharing when the reality of recovery, and that often it isn't just a linear path of, right, you decide you're going to do it, you do it, and then it's straight out. And I think there's a lot of strength for people to know that it doesn't have to be that linear path, and that it's okay. And it's
totally.
And
to be quite frank, I would say so many people, the majority of people, like the people that I work with, are in a state of quasi, and they're trying to get themselves to full recovery. So your story is so powerful for that reason, because I think getting yourself out of quasi and into proper recovery is so, I don't want to say it's harder than starting when you're at rock bottom, but it is freaking hard. Like I watch the struggle that my clients go through, because it's, you know, the same old, but I'm functioning, but no one's asking questions anymore, but no one's worried about me, but my lab works fine, I look normal, blah, blah, all these things that they feel like are against them, and being able to say, hey, look, I actually deserve full recovery, and I'm going to do this. I don't want to just be functioning anymore. I want to be mentally free from this. Like the point you got to, it sounds like, where, yeah, you were going about your life and you were in school and this, but you realize you're missing out. You realize, like, this isn't living. I'm sick of doing this same thing every single day. I didn't know that you had that story with the psychiatrist or psychologist in discharge. I had exactly the same thing happen about 4 months into my own recovery, where I went in, and I hadn't been seeing a therapist up to that point, but I was like, maybe I should talk to someone, like maybe a therapist would be good. And I was kind of doing it on my own, but I thought, you know, therapy is always a good thing. And I went in to this eating disorder specialist therapist, And she asked me if I knew what I weighed, and I told her no. And I told her how free I was feeling. I was just like on fire and just felt like I was on top of the world. I was doing recovery. Finally, my brain was changing. Everything that you just said, I just reminded me of that story. And she said, well, do you want to know what you weigh? And I said, not really. Like, honestly, I don't. I got rid of my scale months ago. I haven't really. I think it's better for me just to not know and just keep going. She says, I think it might be a good idea, though. What if I just weigh you and don't tell you? I mean, seriously, think about like in recovery being asked this and pushed this. And I was like, okay. So we went and blind weighed. We came back in the room and she goes, so what do you think you weigh? I'm like, yeah, I'm just like, are you not like, what is happening? I was like, I don't know. Well, guess. And I told her a number and she goes, well, you know, you're a little bit dysmorphic there, but you know, you have gained a good amount of weight in how many months? And I told her 3 months. Yeah. So maybe let me give you a card for our dietitian. The card for the dietitian and says the same thing. You know, I think it's great and it's exciting for you. I'm sure it's exciting for you to eat whatever you want, whenever you want, but you do see how this could become a problem. And I'm just sitting there like dying inside, right? And I come out and I had 2 emotions going. Like one was just fiery anger, like I'm going to kill this woman. And the other one was like absolute, complete and utter despair and fear and doubt and worry. And oh my gosh, I have messed up my entire life. Like, what am I doing? So I resonate with that experience. And it did derail me. It did derail me for a few weeks. As much as I didn't want to let it, it really did impact my recovery in not a good way at all. But luckily I was able to pick myself up and kind of keep going, as did you, which if anyone out there is listening to this and you've probably had an experience like this, please don't let it mess you up for longer than an hour. Just get back on track and keep going.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I often think and often say to people, the important thing, like at the end of the day, slip ups, setbacks, they happen. Yes, it's what you do with it that matters. Like it's how you come back. It's how you bounce back. It's what you do. That's the important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you shared that. Okay. So you kind of answered the question that I was going to ask next, which was what made you decide to be done with quasi, which you beautifully elaborated on and talked about. You mentioned, I wanted to ask, did you have support other than Andrew?
Yeah. So in my first bit of recovery where I jumped in, I was very much living at home. I had amazing support from my mum, my sister. I had a couple of close friends. My world was quite small then. I think in recovery, there's often that image of, you know, you're going to go out and see people, do things and go. And don't get me wrong, I did go out, but it was very much, my world was still small. Like my brain was just like, I just want to eat. I just want to stay at home and eat. And I had a couple of good friends who got that I didn't want to go out clubbing. I didn't want to do this. I just wanted to stay at home and eat cake on the sofa. And like, they are still my closest friends, like just so great. So and cool. My mum, my sister, so I've been very lucky the whole way through my recovery. And then in terms of quasi, I met Andrew when I was in quasi recovery. And then I was living with him pretty much throughout from then all the way through when I quit it and recovered. So, and he was brilliant.
That's so cool. And he's your fiance now, is that right?
He is, which
so
feels
cool. I love that. That's so cool. That's true love, right? If you can be in a relationship through recovery and still be intact and love each other, it's a sealed deal. It's good. You're going to work out. That's so awesome. That's great. And also, can we just normalize for a second what you mentioned? Like, you just want to sit on the couch and eat cake in recovery, and there's nothing to be ashamed about with that, right? And there's nothing you're doing wrong. And it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm being antisocial though, and I need to go out and be social. Like, if that's what you want to do, is hunker down on the couch and just keep eating cake all day long, let yourself do that, right? Like, that kind of needs to be done. And there's a reason for that, right? That's kind of one of the 3 things we absolutely need for survival is nourishment, and your body's finally getting it. So of course that's all it wants to focus on. So yeah, that's great.
And I do often think in terms of social media and stuff, there is this betrayal of recovery and going out and meeting people and doing hobbies and things. And yes, all of those things did have a trickle effect, but there was also a lot of time where I just wanted to be at home, very close to my fridge, you know. And in early stage recovery, when my extreme hunger was like right up there, I almost anxious being away from the cupboards and the fridge. I didn't like it. I wanted to be close. It's like my had gone, okay, food is now abundantly available here. Let's just stay here. This is good. We just stay. Yeah. We'll just eat. This is good. We can chill. We can eat. We go fridge, cupboard, sofa, fridge, cupboard, sofa. We'll do this. Yep. And I feel like sometimes there's this worry of like, oh, is this, because I had it. I thought, oh my God, is this it? I'm just gonna think about food and be just food all the time forever. And no, I feel like my brain had me in that place because that's where it needed to be in that moment. And as I honored it and did the eating and did the resting, very naturally, my brain then started having a little bit of space and time for, reading. Things like books. I just couldn't read a book. Like, I couldn't read a book in my eating disorder, but I couldn't read a book in the early stage of my recovery because my brain was just like, chocolate biscuits in the cupboard, and then there's chocolate cake, and then we could go here and we could go there, and this is so exciting. Like, I just couldn't concentrate. I'd read a page and be like, what am I even reading? And it's those you start to notice, you're like, oh, I've actually got an interest in this book, and I've just read a few pages, and I've just not thought about food for a little bit. Like, oh gosh, I can see this is actually happening. But yeah, that you have to just go with the time when your body just goes, I just want to be at home, I want to be near the food, and I just want to revel in this. You have to kind of go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people now, when I was recovering, fanny packs weren't back in style from like the 80s, but now they are. And I tell people, like, you have no excuse. Strap a fanny pack to your waist, get some snacks in there, and everywhere you go, you no longer can say, oh, I was stranded here, I got stuck on the bus. You always have food in your fanny pack. And I really genuinely mean that, because I felt the same way. Leaving my house or being away from food made me feel anxious, and I didn't like it. Like, I just wanted to have like food in my arms and in my mouth all day long. And that's totally normal. Absolutely.
I used to go like shopping with friends or something, be like, okay, I'll go shopping, and the shopping would just turn into it would, like, you do pub crawls. I don't know if that's an American thing or just an English thing, but you'll have a pub crawl, which is like where you go out for a night and you go from pub to pub and you have a drink, and you go to the next one and the next one. As I say, maybe just an English thing, but my shopping experiences would turn into food shop crawls. It would just, that bakery, and then that bakery, and then that market. That was me going out for a very long time.
Totally. And when you start noticing other interests, like you said, you get interested in a book. For me, it was like before recovery, like I put food before intimacy. Like, hands down, don't get in the way of my night binge. Don't get in the way, like food. Even like, not to go into too much detail, even during intimacy, I'm thinking about food. Like, I got to get to the food. And I saw that shift happen where it was like, I can't believe I chose that over, like, your brain starts to function a little bit more like a normal, healthy human being's brain would, where for most people, intimacy is something that is enjoyable and probably chosen over a piece of chocolate cake. Whereas when your brain is starved, it's the other way around. So that can be a mental state marker people can look at too. Like, this is good. This is exciting. So yeah. Okay. How did you cope with the weight gain?
So, how did I cope with the weight gain? Right. Well, firstly, I ditched the scales. I actually recorded a video about this for my YouTube a week ago, I think it was, about a recent, I won't share too much because I'm going to put that video out. But basically, for me, ditching the scales was crucial. Like, I think very early on in that first bit of my recovery, I realized that I wasn't kidding anyone with my, but I'm making sure I'm gaining enough. Like, that was just crap. It was just not true at all. That was totally eating disorder driven. I feel like there was never a time where I got off the scales and felt empowered in my recovery. I never got off the scales and felt stronger than I did before I got on them. I never felt more fired up for recovery. And I realized, okay, well, if I'm committing to this and I'm doing this, and if I'm honoring my body, then this is relevant. It's irrelevant information. It's not helping me. Like, if I'm doing the eating, I know if I'm doing the eating enough. Like, you get into bed at the end of the day and you're lying there and you think, I smashed it today. I absolutely.
I'm stuffed full all day long. You've done a good job.
You're like, bloody hell. Yeah, I did everything I could. And I used that as a marker in my own. If I got into bed and I was thinking, I don't think I'd be up. I'd be like, back downstairs. No. So I feel like that was a really important thing for me, ditching the scales. Another thing that was important was wearing comfy clothes. Just for me, in terms of gaining weight, my weight gain happened pretty damn quickly. I was eating a hell of a lot of food, and within months, I was back to before I'd ever had an eating disorder. I'd been discharged from the doctor. They were like, yeah, you're fine. No worries. Goodbye. And I found comfortable clothes, things that I felt, a combination of just scruffy jogging bottoms that I would put on and just be like, oh, but also a couple of nice outfits that actually made me feel nice. Ditching anything that didn't fit immediately, like not holding on, nothing at all. Even if it was brand new, really nice, never worn it, just took it to a charity shop, it's gone. And I think a big thing for me was just being very honest with myself at every stage that weight gain was going to happen. Like my body had been restricted. I was eating food. It was hella hungry. Like weight gain was going to be part of this, and it was a crucial part of it. I feel like I very much agreed with the whole, and it made sense to me, the whole migration response and all that stuff and the psychology of it and all these things. And I also believe very much in how much the overlap between eating disorder symptoms and like the biology of restriction, how much an overlap there. And I was like, I'm just committed to gaining whatever my body needs to gain, because I knew deep down within myself that the approach that the treatment team that I'd been sort of kind of under for a very small amount of time, their approach of, right, you need to get to this much and gain this much by this time, and you need, when you get to here, then we'll change your meal plan and blah, blah, all that stuff. I think I knew deep down that that just wasn't going to cut it, that like that wasn't going to work. I was never going to recover like that. Right. And I just knew that actually I had to trust, I had to accept that weight gain was going to happen. I had to do my bit to wear comfy clothes, ditch the old clothes, ditch the scales, and just sort of let it happen. It's almost, for me, accepting the weight gain was almost like a bit of a combination of leap of faith and fake it till you make it, you know? And I'll just share a little bit, because as I say, I'm going to share posting a video about it. But for a while, I worried that the fact that I had completely stepped away from the scales at all, like I did not know what I weighed. And certainly in those early stages, I felt like it was important I didn't know. It was almost like I was protecting myself. I was like, no, I don't want to see that number. I don't want to trigger. And then, you know, the years go on. I realized, I don't know that number. I've not seen it for ages. And a little thing in the back of my mind was thinking, am I always going to have to do that? Like, am I always going to have to be conscious not to see that number? And then I think going through Quasar and coming to Recovered, I realized it just became not a big deal at all. And then I had to get weighed, what was it, before Christmas or something, for something. And and it was like this number just sort of, it just didn't anything. Like I went in, I had to have it done. It didn't, there was no, I was just chatting to these people in the queue. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. And I came away, didn't think about it. And it was as I was driving home that I was like, bloody hell, that didn't mean anything. And like always, because I'd been told by therapists that in order to be okay with it, I needed to see it. I needed to watch that number going up. And if I didn't do that, then it would shock me and I'd go backwards. And my experience is that I rewired my thought obsession around that number by disengaging with it completely, like totally disengaging. And that is what taught my brain that it wasn't important. Like I feel like I would never have had this outcome if I had been and followed that advice of weighing myself all the time to keep seeing that number, to see it go. I wouldn't. I would have still been reinforcing, yes, in a slightly more positive direction, but I was still reinforcing that you need to pay attention to this number. This number is important. Whereas actually by completely going, I'm just not paying any attention to that, I've rewired it. It now doesn't mean anything. It's like someone's just said some random thing and it's just gone over my shoulder. And
yeah. That's so good. I just did a video on this as well about the argument that I get a lot from people is I need to see the number to desensitize myself. My treatment team says that if I see the number, then I can get used to blah, 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 all that stuff. Well, I tried doing that for 20 years. Like, do you know how many attempts I tried to recover while weighing myself? Nothing ever good came of it. Nothing. If it went down, my eating disorder had a party. If it went up, I freaked out. My eating disorder grabbed control. I restricted more. Like, it never worked. I really can attribute a lot of my full recovery to the fact that I ran over my scale with my car. It was empowering. It got out of the house and it was just a done deal, not happening. And I feel like that's when things started to actually change for the good. So I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And I'm excited to have your video come out as well. I'm sure it'll be great. So yeah, that's really good. Anything else as far as, I know this is just a question I get so much, you know, how did you cope with the weight gain? And my answer to that is I was kind of forced in a corner. I had to, like, what was my other option? You know, that's how I got through it. Was I realized I dealt with reality. I dealt with the fact that my genetics are not going to be what I wanted them to be. And I dealt with the fact that I had to overcome this fear of gaining weight if I wanted to recover. Therefore, I was forced to just keep going, just to keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, for me, I just accepted that I wanted my brain to be free. Like, I wanted my brain back. I wanted to be me again. I wanted to be able to be who I am, living the life that I want to live without like this, even when it was just that, those faint quasi twitterings, I just didn't want that. I was so done with it. And I was so done. I kind of went, bring it on. Wherever my body wants me to be, I'm happy with that. If I'm really my eating disorder, I am ready to embrace wherever my body wants me to settle, and wherever it's going to be is going to be the healthiest place it wants to be. Like, that's where, and I will just learn to get used to wherever that happens to be. Like, I was just ready. I was ready to be like, I'm done, bring it on.
Yeah. And that's such a different mentality from, I'm going to go for it. But if it gets to be too much, I can go back. I hope that it stops where I'm hoping it stops. Like, that's never, your eating disorder will eat you alive. It's never going to happen. You have to go into the mentality you just said. I want this. I'm going to do it. I'll figure out a way to get by. I'll figure out a way to accept it. And you did. So yeah, I think that's great. Okay.
And one thing I was going to say as well, I also, and I know, I'm sure you did a video about this, but I reiterate it completely, that the worries I had about accepting my recovered body, they just aren't reflected in the reality of actually living in my, like, it's so not a big deal at all. Like, if I had just fast forward into now, it's just so hard to word it. I find it so hard to articulate how it is just be in a body and be like, oh, this is where it wants to be. This is me doing my thing. All these things, my eating disorder was like, oh, it's going to be like this. It's going to be like this. And what about that? And oh, they just paled into nothingness. It's kind of just dropped off. And yeah.
I genuinely felt like, maybe you can relate, a rebirth. Like, I really felt like I got another chance at life once I just figured out that I can actually just accept my body as it is. I can just accept it. Wow, here's a whole nother way of living. How interesting, right? And it just was like all these new experiences that were before me as, you know, a totally grown woman. Now I'm entering into like real life. It was so exciting and liberating. And I think what you keep mentioning too, I want to touch on, is like those little tiny sneaky eating disordered behaviors that technically no one would ever know about, right? Like, genuinely nobody, not the best. Even sometimes I tell people, myself, with all the experience I have, even sometimes I can't exactly pinpoint only you, the person that's trying to recover, knows what those behaviors are. They're so sneaky sometimes, but those are the ones that if you overlook, you will never fully recover. I have to make that so clear all the time. You will not fully recover if you're still having to use the same silverware, and you still have to have the same bread, and you still can only have X amount of cheese per day. Like, those are the things that nobody would ever notice, but you will not be able to fully recover if you don't address them. So I'm glad that you talked about that.
Yeah, no, 100%, because my experience very much in the first sort of bit of my recovery, I had that slip back, and then I came back and I got myself to a really good place. But I can look back now and see that I didn't deal with all the little tendrils of disorder. And I did move out, and I took my foot off the accelerator, and I started focusing on other things in life. Those little tendrils I hadn't focused on, they kind of just, you know, slowly but surely and subtly grew into different areas, over different things. And when I decided I'm done with this, and I was like, right, I am not doing this anymore, I want to fully recover, only then did I really realize how much that network had expanded. It was when I started challenging things that I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this has become an issue again. Like, how, and that, for me, what you've just said is so true. Like, you do have to target those little tendrils, because whilst they're there, they will always just have that ability to just slowly sink their way back in. And for me, my quasi was very much about seek and destroy. You know, it wasn't about a very obvious, like, oh, that's a fear food. Like, oh, I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to eat that and eat that and eat that. It wasn't the things. It was things like foods that I didn't like. I had these lists of foods that I just didn't like. I'm sure, you know, everyone's got things they don't like very much. But my list, I kind of cottoned on to the fact that there was some foods on it that I was like, why is that on my list of things I don't like? You know, like blackjack. And I was like, do I really not like flat? Is that actually true? And I wrote myself a list of all the things that I didn't like. and I ate them. And
Right.
lo and behold, the majority
You
of
like them.
I like them. Yeah. And it's so weird how I had bought into the I don't like those things for so long that it almost just become fact. I didn't even question it as disorder or not. I was just like, oh, but that's just, I just don't like that thing. And I almost was blinded to the fact that it was disordered. And so that was very much my quasi. It was about looking at every single thing. You know, some of the stuff was more obvious when I did delve in and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's something I need to deal with. But other stuff was, you know, things like red meat. I just had a tendency to avoid it. I wouldn't have said I was a pescatarian or anything, but I just had a tendency. And funnily enough, that tendency looked like, oh, I don't really like it when you cook things next to each other. And I thought, well, that's not right. Is if I just don't really like it that much, then why would I have such a problem with you barbecuing the chicken next to the red meat? Why would that be a problem? You know, or if you're making pasta and it's got some chorizo in it, why would that be a problem if I just, you know, why would I not just eat this? Why am I picking it? So I started just being really like brutally honest with myself and was calling myself out on everything and was then like, right, I've got so much to work on. And I think that's a normal thing as well. I think some go into recovery, either stage of it, whether it's quasi or initially, and you think, right, this is what it is. And only as you go in, you realize, oh my gosh, I've got a lot to do. You know,
slightly overwhelming, and humbling.
It can be overwhelming, but the thing is it's only by taking the actions that you gain the clarity to be able to see the work you've got to do. And so actually having a better image, being able to see everything is an empowering thing. It means you've already done the work to be able to get to that place, you know?
Yeah. And then if you're like a go-getter and a goal setter, right, you're like, I got my work mapped out for me. Okay, looks like I got a lot of things I can accomplish every day. So you kind of get into that mindset of like, all right, let's do this. But yeah, you can't really make progress if you're not aware of what you're doing that's still disordered. And also, I think sometimes when people go from a place of like, you know, being very deep in their illness up to quasi, that oftentimes people think, well, I'm like everyone else now, but like everyone else, majority of people are doing some kind of weird disordered thing with food or dieting or exercise. So like if you're using your measurement of recovery to look at what other people in the outside world are doing and thinking, see, I do just what so-and-so does. They don't eat breakfast. That's normal. I do intermittent fasting, but before it wasn't even eating. It's like, that can't be your like guideline, your goalpost of like, okay, here's full recovery. That's not at all. You've got to be really honest with yourself and ask yourself, is what I'm doing disordered at all, regardless of what the rest of the world's doing? Stay very focused on what you need to work on in your own recovery. So.
Absolutely. And the other thing in relation a little bit to that is that I often found myself like the sticking point would be, oh, but I used to not be able to do this. I used to not be able to do that. And I would compare where I was at with where I'd been. And actually, I flipped it. I said, no, what is totally eating disorder free me? What's that person like? Who is she? What's she like? What would she do in this situation? That person who does not give a crap about any of these rules. That person. And I had to just focus, instead of looking backwards, it was about flipping, going, no, what's the difference between where I'm at right now and that person who is completely and utterly free? Like, yeah, okay, be proud of the fact that you've come from where you've been. But what are you going to do? Spend forever just sitting here looking backwards, going, oh, look how great I am. I used to not be able to do that. And now I can do this. Like, I wanted to get to that place of full freedom. And so I had to shift my focus forwards and go, okay, well, what's the difference between where I'm at now and where I want to be? And then I had to focus on what I needed to do to get between that.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Close that gap wherever you are now to full recovery. That's what we're working on closing. So yeah, that's awesome. Did you find yourself, these are just really commonly asked questions, so thank you for being so honest with your own experience. Did you find yourself still really hungry even after gaining a lot of weight? And if so, how did you continue listening to all of your hunger, both mental and physical?
Yeah, so in that early part of my recovery, when I first jumped in, my extreme hunger was like a raging beast. It was from day one, it was like, yeah, I'm here. I gained my weight back within months, like the first few months. And then, but my extreme hunger lasted on way after that. I feel like it was difficult in some way, but then also I think I'd gone into recovery not to gain the weight back. I'd very much gone in to get my life back, get my brain back. And I feel like because I was coming at it from that point, I was like, yes, my eating disorders wanted to be like, oh, you've got to hear now. So that, you know, that your old clothes will fit. So, you know, you must change things. That I think somewhere deep inside myself, I knew that if I bought it, I'd never actually get anywhere from it. And I also knew that I trusted my body's. At that stage, I feel like I was like, you know what, I can't not honor this hunger. My hunger was so intense. I was like,
right,
I'm gonna keep eating. I'm just going to go with it. And like I said before, it is almost a bit of a leap of faith. You know, like I think it's very easy when you, like when I talk retrospectively about my experience, to sound like I'd got it all together and that I knew what I was doing, and that every day I was like, yeah, look at me eating. Realistically, at the time, it was utter chaos. Like I was so, oh my God, what is going on? Like when is this ever going to end? Why is this happening? And I was so overwhelmed and so confused. And I'd sit on the Christmas floor, the kitchen floor, and be like, oh my goodness, am I ever not just going to have my brain constantly in the cupboard? Like I've got my body back. I've done this. Why is it not changing? And a lot of it was just sticking power. You know, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to keep going. And I focused on each day at a time. I think that helped a lot, just trying to keep the moment. Because I found that whenever I let myself spiral on and think, oh, but then how long is this going to go? I knew that my eater sort of just jumped in. And it was like, oh, well, we'll just make changes. And I think I instinctively knew, well, that's not the right way to go. And then fast forward to when I went into like quit quasi, I did have extreme. It wasn't as intense as in those first stages, but my hunger at that stage definitely ramped up a hell of a lot. And at that stage, I was completely, I mean, weight restored. I wasn't weighing myself at all, but you know, when realistically you've been at a weight for a while, and my size hasn't changed a huge amount since then. Like my clothes haven't changed a huge amount over my quasi recovery, but my hunger was definitely at a very high level. And something I think I learned to accept was that my hunger wasn't there just to gain weight. My hunger was there for a hell of a lot of other stuff. And I kind of accept that maybe that doesn't make sense to me, but maybe it was just how it is. Like I can't explain why I'm so hungry and what is going on and where it's doing, but all I know is my body is saying, oh my word, I'm really hungry. I need more biscuits right now. And I'm eating, and I can eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. And I think it's only now come out the other side that my hunger's now normalized, and my mental hunger is just, I mean, gone pretty much compared to what it was. It's just so normal now. I just don't think about food until, you know, oh, dinner or something. Now I can look back and go, oh, it all makes so much sense. Like the fact that my hunger was there, like I just had to keep trudging on. And with time, commitment, it did go down. Like it did, my hunger did normalize, but it wasn't something where I was like, right, today I'm just going to eat less because of this reason. It was very much my body led the way. And I feel like that is the thing I had to just leap of faith again. It's
huge leap of faith, because you're not able to see that until you kind of get to the other side. Like I can tell people from now until I die, just trust your body, trust your body, trust your body. But until they've been through the experience, and then you reflect back and you're like, holy crap, I can trust my body, you know, like you just have to have that leap of faith. So yeah, that's a really good point.
I definitely think recovery is one of those things where you answer your own questions as you go along. You know, like I have all these answers now, but when I was doing it, I didn't have them. I was confused. I was lost. I was overwhelmed. I was trying to find answers. I'd look on the internet. I'd do this. I had all those things. I had all those worries, but I just kept going. I brought it back into the now. I was like, no, I'm just going to trust my body. I'm just going to trust my body. I'm going to do what it wants. I'm going to honor its hunger. I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to keep pushing myself and keep challenging. I'm just going to trust. I'm just going to trust it's happening. It's almost that thing where I had a few people that had almost like, a bit like running point for you know, I was like, no, they've done it. They honored their bodies. They honored their hunger. They've come out the other side of this. I'm going to trust it. I'm just going to trust it. And I feel like it was very much one of those things that I answered the questions I had as I went through it. You know, all these questions that I was uncertain of, the more I did, the more momentum I picked up, the more confidence I got in the connection I had with my body, the more trust I built up with it, the more all these answers, they just answered themselves as I moved through.
Yeah, but there's definitely a period, I know you can agree, of just complete and utter terror where you're not quite seeing the light. You're going through this blindly. You're just kind of going through the motions, listening to that hunger, feeling really chaotic, feeling out of control, watching your body grow every day, no longer being able to justify where's this hunger coming from, and you just keep trudging on. And you will get there. You really will.
Yeah, absolutely will. I just remember a lot of getting very annoyed that I'd sit down to eat something and then my brain would already be like, oh, and now McDonald's. And I think, well, I haven't even finished this thing, which you were, and now you're thinking this thing, which is very frustrating. Yeah. But then I'd be like, right, we're going to McDonald's, aren't we? And I'd be in the queue for McDonald's and my brain would go, oh, the garage across the road, that's got these. And I'd be like, oh my goodness, when is this going to end? But it does end. It absolutely does. I know myself. I know that extreme hunger is one of those things that lots of different services are like, oh no, that's, you know, that's not right. That's I would never have got better if I'd not honored that hunger. That hunger was there for a hell of a good reason. And the best thing that I did, it literally saved my life, that I honored it and I just trusted it. And it was blind faith as much as anything.
Yeah.
And,
totally.
and I've come out the other end. And I'm so grateful and also proud of the me who was in that time, who didn't know the answers and was confused and wasn't sure and was trying to find affirmation, was trying to get, and was just stumbling on and doing it their best and trying. And I feel like anyone who's at that place, like, just keep going, keep going. It does get easier and and it's so worth it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And for me, that period that you're explaining was 3 or 4 months into my recovery, and I gained my weight really quick too. So I was, you know, sitting there in the drive-thru at McDonald's, looking at my body that I didn't recognize, kind of freaking out about how quickly I had gained the weight. And all my thoughts were racing about food, this and then that. And then if I go there, and I've talked about this, I ate every 5 minutes, and I was no longer in that quote unquote, you know, low body weight for my body. I was actually in a very much more stable, what you would maybe consider more of a rehabilitated state, when all of that crazy chaos around food was going on in my head. And I think that's really important for people to remember, is I think they think that, like, if they don't respond to that the first month of recovery, it's too late. They've already gained weight in a disordered way and now they can't. And I just can't emphasize enough how incredibly common it is for you to have that raging, crazy mental hunger when you're in a body that very much looks like you shouldn't be so hungry anymore, according to your own judgment.
No, absolutely. Like I say, I think it's that realization that hunger, you might not be able to you might not be able to logically go, oh, this is what it's for. You know, this is what it's for. You can't see what your body is doing, but you just have to trust that there's a reason for it. And there is a reason. And it, yeah.
So I think that's a lot of why I do what I do now, is because for 20 years I did go through services and people telling me how much I was supposed to weigh and telling me, you know, this meal plan I should follow, and it never ever worked. And when I finally found this method actually is what got me to fully recover, I'm like, please let me save years off of other people's lives. Like, you're not broken, it's not your fault, you just haven't quite I guess been given permission or been educated that there's actually another way, and you actually can trust your body. You don't need other people or other numbers to tell you where you should be at. So that's awesome. I think that's really important. Thanks for sharing that. What do you want people to know about what it's like to be fully recovered?
Gosh, what's it? It's one thing I do know is that describing what full recovery is like is quite difficult to articulate. I think the biggest overriding thing for me that is joyous is just the contentment just the inner contentment, just that inner stillness, that ability to just be at peace with yourself. Like, and it's in so many more areas than just food related stuff. You know, just my entire world is different. You know, I don't clean as much. I'm way more relaxed about the grades I get at uni. I'm easier going on myself with everything. Like, I don't know, it's just, it falls out to so many things. My relationships, my friendships, I'm more present. And I think the main thing for me is the contentment. It's just the ability to just be okay and peaceful with myself. You know, I felt like one of the biggest things that kicked me into kicking quasi was I was so sick of living my life like I was on this conveyor belt. You know, it was like, yes, there was the food rules and all that kind of stuff, but it was very much, it was my day. I'd wake up, I'd get up, I'd do this and this and this, and then I'd have breakfast and I'd do this and I'd have lunch and I'd do it. And my whole life was like in this kind of rigid thing, and the food rules slotted into that. But there was so much stuff that my life was dictated by, and there was so much rigidity in it, and so much little space for spontaneity and fun. And now just to be able to, just the freedom and the contentment of just waking up and being like, oh, it's just it's just a day. This is really, yeah, it's really hard to put
Makes me so happy. Yeah.
But
It is
that's
really hard. And it's hard to be in a place where you're still working through your recovery and hear people say that, like, yeah, right. No way. I can't, not me, you know. And actually, if you're listening to this, you're no different than Emily. You're no different than me. You absolutely can get to that point. It just takes a lot of really hard work, a lot of grit, and a lot of determination.
Yeah, I remember thinking, oh gosh, I'll never get there. It'll never happen. I'll always have it a little bit. It'll always just be a tiny little bit in the back of my mind. And you get professionals that tell you the same thing, that, oh, you can never really be completely free. It's always going to be there. And the reality is that is not true. You can be 150 million% completely free of an eating disorder. And life can just be wonderfully normal again, like wonderfully average. Like, recovered life isn't everything's perfect, but you can just be present for all of it properly, you know. And yeah, it's just yeah.
So it seriously makes me so giddy to listen to you talk. And I didn't even work with you throughout your recovery. I didn't, discover you until long after, but I just think like your story is so inspirational and so encouraging for people to listen to. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to share it and all the work you're doing in the community. I know you have a YouTube channel, you have Instagram that you're on and very active on. And I think just the time that you put into that with your busy schedule is how you give back, right? Like, I feel like you are doing that and you're helping, you're going to touch so many people's lives with it. So yeah, I'm just so grateful for your story. Thank you so much for coming on. I think we've gone, probably long enough. I feel like we could talk forever though. So I'll have to have you on for another time, another interview. I'm sure people will want you back. But yes, thank you so much for taking the time.
No, thank you. It's been, it's really wonderful to talk. And it's something I'm just so passionate about. I feel like I wanted to share my experience because I felt like I wanted a me when I was there. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, oh, actually, learned so much through this that I want to give, I want to share. And my lessons do contradict with a lot of what the services, the professionals that I came up to, and they didn't help. And what I've learned, I love sharing. I love being able to help people. It means a huge amount. It means a huge amount.
Yeah. Well, that's so awesome. I'm so grateful for you to be in this community. So thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.